And I'm going to be admitting people as we go here. So if I pause for a second and looked at my screen, just bear with me. All right, let's see. So I'm going to share my screen. Let's see if I can do this right. Good. This way. Let's see the chat here. All right, so you should all be able to see my screen. Somebody give me a type in chat that yes, we could see that. I would appreciate it. Awesome, great. All right. So welcome everybody. My name is Andy Bacon. I'm the race director and owner of a company called EX2 Adventures, based in Northern Virginia. This is VentureQuest Q&A mini clinic, pre-race brief sort of thing. I'm glad you're here. I'm stoked that you're doing VentureQuest. It's one of our favorite events of the year. I have a great time planning it. I have a great time hosting it, and I'm glad that you chose this event to be a part of. So thanks. All right, so here's what we're going to cover. We are going to cover a very brief introduction about EX2 and about VentureQuest, and then I'm going to switch and go right into race-specific things about VentureQuest. So we'll go over some important logistics about the event. This is a great place to have questions. If you have any questions about, that I don't answer, like what time do we get there, that sort of thing. I want to make sure everyone feels comfortable about the general logistics. I am going to send out a very detailed pre-race email, which will have a lot of information in it about when to be there and directions and all that sort of stuff on Sunday. That's my plan. So between tonight, what's on the website, and that email on Sunday should answer most of your questions, but I'm always available by email, or you can even text me or give me a call. We'll talk about it, and I'll make sure that you have the information that you need. And then I'll talk about a little bit about my style of course design as it relates to VentureQuest. And then I'll actually show you an overview of the race. And so I have a little graphic that doesn't really give away much details. It's really hard to guess kind of where we're going from it, but I will tell you general the flow of both the 6-hour race and the 10-hour race. I'll do that. And then once that's over, anybody who doesn't really have any general questions about adventure racing, if you want to stick around and be a part of the mini clinic, I'm going to talk about more generally what is adventure racing, some formats, kind of what are some team considerations, go into a little bit more about rules of travel and maps, some gear. It's a great place to ask questions about gear if you have any questions about kind of what to bring, what's good, what's bad, and different. Some teamwork, and then some resources at the end. So that is the plan. All right. So first and foremost, EX2. So EX2 Adventures has been around since about 2000 or so. It was started by a good friend of mine, a guy named Jim Harmon. And before actually EX2 was even a thing, he put on this race called VentureQuest. And the first VentureQuest was held at Hemlock Overlook. And it really started to put into movement what became EX2 Adventures. So 23 some odd years later, I took over the company about 6 years ago now. This will be our 17th iteration of VentureQuest. We had many of them at Fountainhead Regional Park in Fairfax Station. I've hosted a couple. I hosted a couple out of Pohick Bay on the Mason Neck Peninsula, some more back at Fountainhead. And then last year, for the first time ever, we moved across the river into the Maryland side, and we hosted out of Button Farm Living History Center, which is in Germantown. We have a couple events there, and we've had many events over the years at Button Farm, and it's a really great just venue for like a staging area. And it is connected to some of the best trail systems in Montgomery County. So it really is a great place. So last year, I had to modify the course because although the mountain biking is awesome, lots of it is on dirt, as you can imagine. And last year, we weren't getting a hurricane, but we were certainly getting the remnants of a hurricane, and we had got like ridiculous amounts of rain. And so basically it turned into like a big trek and a paddle. So everybody who did it, they probably were like, oh my God, I'm never trekking again after that. But it turned out, I think, great. It was fun. Everybody had great smiles afterwards. And so the reason why I bring that up is we're like getting almost like a hurricane this weekend. And all I can think about was like, well, thank goodness that VentureQuest is not on this weekend, because you're supposed to get like 3 inches of rain on Saturday or something ridiculous. Anyway, so that is the brief history. We've done VentureQuest a lot. EX2 puts on anywhere from like 18 to 20 events a year. Last couple of years, this has been our only adventure race, but we also put on lots of fun trail running races, a couple mountain bike races, a gravel grinder, and exterior triathlon. My interest in adventure racing goes way back. So I did my first adventure race in 2006. And ever since then, it's been a large portion of my life. I've raced more or less kind of as my life ebbed and flowed. You know, I have a couple of kids, and sort of that slowed me down a little bit. And when I took over EX2 6 years ago, it sort of took me out of racing for a little while. But I try to do a couple of races a year. I've done a couple of world championships. I've done a bunch of US Air Nationals, raced with lots of great teammates, and it's near and dear to my heart. I'm very passionate about it. And again, one of my goals of putting on VentureQuest is not only to put on a great event, but it's also to prepare you or help expose you to what you might see at other events. The Mid-Atlantic is a hotbed of adventure racing activity, and it has been for a long time. So there's lots of great adventure race promoters, much more so in the Mid-Atlantic than other parts of the country. And so there are really great opportunities to get into different types of adventure races, different lengths of adventure races right from where we are. If you ever have any question about, recommendations about other races you should do, I know pretty much all the promoters in the area, most of them pretty well, and I'm happy to tell you, hey, you should try this for a next step or what have you. Again, I'm always available, and I always love talking about adventure racing. All right. So with that, just a reminder to the people who joined, if you have any questions, please put it in chat as I'm going through. This will be particularly relevant because I'm going to switch gears now, and I want to talk about some logistics for VentureQuest. So I'm going to just switch out of here and give me a quick update in chat. If you should be able to see my web browser now. Everybody see that? Somebody give me a quick. Yes, good, awesome. So this is just EX2 Adventures. This is the VentureQuest website. Hopefully you all have seen this. I'm going to use this to just sort of frame the conversation as we go through. So hopefully everybody knows the race is a week from Saturday on September 30th. We stage out of Button Farm Living History Center, which is in Germantown. It's a private farm, so please don't go there before race day. Now, it's a really great park. It's actually inside Seneca Creek State Park. It's just a great venue. And so I'll provide directions when I send my pre-race email on Sunday, but it is in Germantown. So it's not too far away if you live kind of anywhere in the DMV, or even if you don't, it's not too far. We have 2 different races. We have a 10-hour race and a 6-hour race. They start at different times. So I'm going to talk about that in a little bit. The race format. So if you're on a team, adventure racing is traditionally a team sport, but we do have many soloists who are doing this race. But if you are on a team, it's not a relay. So you are traveling together throughout the entire event. Distances. So these are pretty accurate. The course is fully designed, and I'll tell you more about it as we go through. The distances, distances are always a little tough in adventure racing because you have routes to decide which way you're going to go, right? So there certainly is some variation. But generally, the 6-hour race is about 20 plus miles. There's going to be, 5-ish plus or minus of trekking in some shape, form, or another. Definitely 15 miles of mountain biking and some paddling. The paddling is not like a huge discipline, but there is paddling. And it's somewhere around sort of that 2-ish mile, maybe a little bit longer, maybe a little bit shorter, depending on sort of what you do. But that's the distance of the paddle. In terms of disciplines, everybody's mountain biking, everybody's trekking, everybody's paddling, and there is obviously map and compass. You're orienteering or navigating your way around the course. Now, in terms of difficulty, I label this as sort of like beginner to intermediate in terms of how hard the navigation is. I'm going to talk more about that in a second when I talk about the 10-hour course. So the 10-hour course, it's longer, as you'd expect. It's about 35 plus miles, more trekking, so like double the amount of trekking easily. 10 plus miles. Mountain biking, 25 miles of mountain biking, and some paddling. And I've labeled this same discipline, so biking, trekking, paddling, orienteering, and I've labeled this intermediate to advanced. And so I want to talk about this a little bit, and this relates to sort of my style of designing courses. My MO when I design courses generally is to try to keep you out there, or as many people as possible out on the course for the full time. I personally don't like it. Like if I were to go do a course that was labeled as like an 8-hour race or something, and if I finished in like 3 or 4 hours, I might feel really good because I probably did really, really well. But I'm like, hey man, I paid for, longer distance. So generally my MO is to make things long enough that they keep most teams out on the course the entire time. What that translates to is that a lot of teams aren't going to clear the course. That's okay. So just like know that about me and sort of the lengths of the courses and the challenges, that many teams are not going to get every single point. How that relates to sort of how I label things beginner and intermediate, or intermediate and advanced, there are easy points to find in each course, meaning like it's on a trail. So if you're walking down the right trail, you will find the checkpoint. There are harder points on each course. Even in the 6-hour race, there are points that I would say are firmly like intermediate orienteering points that you might see on an orange or maybe even a little higher orienteering course. But if like my intention is to keep you out there a lot, if you are more a beginner, whether it's navigation or you may be moving at a slower pace, you might not be able to get everything. My intention is that you just get as many as you can, get the points that you can, and then continue moving through the course. Also, in terms of like difficulty, one thing I did in the 10-hour course to make it a little bit more advanced is there's more legs, there's more moving parts, there's more decisions that you have to make about managing your time. Everybody's going to have to manage your time because you have to get back on time to get back to the finish. There are going to be some time cutoffs in the race, and that's mostly so that nobody comes back, or as few people as possible, like super late. And that'll be addressed in your rules of travel. And if you don't know what that is, I'll talk about it when you get to the clinic part. So just know that I tend to make the courses longer rather than shorter, and I fully expect that not everyone's going to clear the course. So just know that about how I design the courses. All right, I guess a reminder, if anybody has any questions, you can type them in the chat. Ken said no audio. I just want to make sure you guys can hear me talking. Can somebody type in the chat? Yes, you guys can hear me talking. Okay, great, cool. Maybe nervous for a second. Awesome. All right, so let's see. Format, resources. So this is just something I want to make sure you guys are aware that's on the website. And so I think I added this last year. So underneath this resources section, there's a sample rules of travel, a sample overview map, which we actually did for this race, but we're not doing for this one. There's a couple of different maps. There's like a sample orienteering map, and there's a sample paddling map and a biking map. These are just really to expose you on the types of maps that you might see at VentureQuest. They're all a little bit different. And again, during the clinic, I'm going to show you each one of these to go a little bit deeper, but just know that these are there. So if you're a beginner, you may want to take a look at them, read through them just to get a sense of what you're going to see in the race. So they're not like completely foreign to you. All right, so in terms of schedule, so the 10-hour race, we open check-in and map distribution at 6 a.m. It is going to be dark. So make sure you bring a headlamp, and please drive super careful when you're coming into the farm. The farm is like a working farm. There's not gonna be like animals all over the place, but please, there's gonna be people mulling about. We'll have people helping you know where to park, but just drive slowly. Bring a headlamp, right? So it's gonna be dark if you show up at 6 o'clock and get your maps. And so make sure you have a way to look at those maps, right? So make sure you bring a headlamp or some other sorts of light so you can look at your maps. At 7:15, I'll do a pre-race briefing, answer any questions that people have about the event, and then the 10-hour race starts at 8 o'clock. Once I'm done going through this, I'll show you what an overview, kind of generally what you're going to be doing. But both events will have some sort of prologue. They're not elaborate, but they're really just designed to kind of provide some space with the teams. But they will have some sort of prologue in addition to what you see on the rules of travel on your maps. 6 o'clock, the race closes for the 10-hour race, and then we'll do awards shortly after that. For the 6-hour race, check-in and map distribution starts at 6:30 a.m. At 8:15, we'll do a pre-race briefing, and 9 o'clock, the 6-hour race starts. 3 o'clock, the race course closes for the 6-hour, and then we'll do awards at 3:30 after that. There's a great question. Josh asked you about camping. So camping is available. I think I sent that in one of my most recent emails. You can camp on site at Button Farm. It's $20, and that money goes right to the farm. It's a nonprofit. They're wonderful people. So it's $20. You can camp Friday night. You can camp Friday night and Saturday. You can camp just Saturday. It doesn't matter to me. Just know that there is it's going to be sort of like field camping. So there's no showers, there's no running water. There are porta johns there that we have for the event, but it is what you get. There's a creek that's walkable, so if you need to like do a quick shower afterwards, that's a good way to do it. It is right next to the staging area, so like literally like where you camp and where you park, it's all within the same sort of big field. So if you camp at Button Farm the night before or the night after the race, you won't have very far to go for check-in. I will tell you, I ask that you please not like mull around the places, because there are obviously going to be checkpoints hanging in the woods or whatever. So just don't go like rummaging around around that area. Not that there's too much around the farm, but there is some. So I just on the honor system there. And Josh, I hope that answered your question. Let's see. Okay, gear. So for these type of races, again, my MO is to keep the gear list short and sweet. The longer races you do, or even some shorter races, depending on the race director and where the race is, you might have more or less more requirements. But I just kind of say, here's the basics you're going to need. So everybody's going to need a bike, right? I recommend you ride a mountain bike. You are going to be riding some great single track trails, and if a mountain bike just makes it more fun. Can you ride other bikes? Sure. Would I ride like a road bike with like 23s on them? No, I wouldn't ride a bike, right? But a mountain bike is, or some sort of hybrid, mountain bike is best, but mountain bike is best. A bike helmet. Everybody's got to have a bike helmet, buckled anytime you're on your bike, no exceptions. And then enough way to carry what you're going to need. So you're going to have to carry water. You're going to have to carry food. You're going to have to carry your running shoes. If you happen to use clipless pedals on your bike, you're going to have to carry your running shoes in some way. So some sort of backpack. There is going to be water in one location on the 6-hour course and water in 2 locations on the 10-hour course. And when I show you the overviews, I'll try to remember to sort of show you where that is. I won't tell you how the exact duration of how long, but like 6-hour race, like you're going to see it water at 2 locations, and you really shouldn't have a problem with like water on the course. Same thing goes for the 10-hour race. When you check in, you're going to get your maps. You get your rules of travel, and you get your passport. Now, so for this race, passport, we use electronic timing. So your passport is going to look like this. It's a little like orienteering dipper thingamajiggy. Please don't lose this. They're not like crazy expensive, but they are expensive, and you will be charged for it if you happen to lose one. But you'll get this when you check in. I would love for you to carry some sort of basic bike repair stuff. So like a spare tube and some way to inflate it is like the bare minimum, right? And so if you do any sort of mountain biking, that's just sort of common sense. You'd have something so that if you get stranded 5 miles away, you're not, up a creek. A watch. So you are welcome to use watches that have GPS if they have an adventure racing mode. So the Garmin Enduro, maybe some of the new fancy Phoenixes, they might have the adventure race mode on it. If you don't know what that is, don't sweat it. But if you have a GPS watch that doesn't have that stuff, I know lots of people like to track their, record their things for Strava or whatever. Here's the deal. Turn it on, put it in your backpack. I am not going to police people. There are many ways to cheat in the sport, and look, we are all going to trust each other, and it's way against the spirit of the sport to use something that is GPS enabled, or a phone with where am I, whatever. So I want you to carry a phone, at least one per team, and if you have some fancy watch that tracks you, just turn it on, put it in your backpack, and don't look at it. Right. Same thing goes with your phone. The phone is really for emergencies. Like if you find somebody who falls and breaks your leg or something, or you get hurt, or you're like completely lost or whatever, you're like, I don't know, you can pick up the phone. There's great cell phone coverage over the entire course. So it's really for safety. But it is, if somebody sees you using it, or whatever, you'd obviously be disqualified, right? So please just go by the spirit of what we're trying to do with the race. Small dry bag. You gotta have somewhere to keep yourself in, especially on the paddle, right? So it doesn't have to be fancy. If you have a dry bag, like a commercially made little dry bag, you're more than welcome to use that. You can also just have a couple of Ziploc bags. Put it in one, close it, put another Ziploc bag over it, and you'll be totally fine. A whistle. So this is mandatory. Most backpacks these days have a whistle integrated in either the sternum strap or somewhere else. If you have a backpack that doesn't have a whistle on it, you have to have one. At least somebody on the team has to have a whistle. Again, this is for safety. It's a great way to get attention is blowing a whistle, right? So somebody on it, you gotta have at least one per team. And then one per team, a space blanket. And so lots of races will require everybody to have a space blanket. I don't do that because this race is so urban, but it's a very common requirement in most adventure races that every single person on a team has a space blanket. And this is just for emergencies. Even when it's 60 degrees out, if it starts raining or something, you can get cold very, very quickly. And that space blanket will keep you feeling comfy if you need it. So at least one per team. And you can get them on Amazon if you don't have one. They're super tiny and not complicated. Same for whistles. You can get them on Amazon. For recommended gear, some way to, so the maps are going to be printed on water-resistant paper, but it's a good idea to have a way to protect it. I wouldn't put it in the water and just kind of let it float next to you. So try to protect your maps as best as possible. But having Ziplocs is fine. All the maps are 8.5 by 11 pieces of paper, so they'll fit in a standard Ziploc without too much of a problem. If you have a fancy map case, you're welcome to bring that as well. Obviously, clothes. I don't know what the weather looks like. The weather long-term forecast, knock on wood, looks pretty good, but who knows what's going to happen over the next week. It's probably going to be chilly in the morning. The mornings have gotten pretty chilly, so probably in the 50s, but it might warm up. So I would just dress appropriately. If there's a threat of rain or whatever, have a raincoat is great. But just dress appropriately. I will say pants. For the 6-hour course, I would say you could probably get away without wearing shorts. I think, there are places in the woods, depending on your route, that you would go through things that you wish you probably have pants on, but depending on your route or whatever, you can probably maybe get away in shorts. For the 10-hour course, if you do the whole thing, you are going to wish you had pants for some of the sections, for sure. So whether you wear them the whole time or have them so you can take them on and off, but just to repeat, like on the 10-hour course, if I was doing the race, I would at least carry something to cover my legs. Some of those sections, the vegetation is pretty thick. There are thorns out there. I was out there today, actually, and I didn't wear pants, and I have cuts on my legs. So pants are a good thing, especially if you're doing a 10-hour race. And then a compass. I will preface this by saying if you don't know how to use a compass, then a compass is probably going to be of little value to you. However, compasses are great at telling you one important thing, which is basically which way is north, south, east, or west. And so even with that, I think it's a great idea to have a compass, even if it's just like, hey, which way is north? All right, directions, they're there. Again, button farm. A couple of rules. Again, no GPSs, like I told you. Especially like on bikes, a lot of people have like fancy bike computers that are GPS enabled. You can have a non-GPS bike computer. Those work just by the revolutions of your wheel, but you can't have like a fancy Garmin, even the one that measures distance via GPS on your bike. That's not allowed. All your teammates, if you're doing it with a team, have to stay within 100 feet of each other at all times. So you can't just like send your fastest teammate, up the hill to get the point if it's like a mile away. you all have to stay together. And that's the spirit of the sport. It's also done for safety. Obviously, you got to follow the rules. Be a good sport. I think that's basically it there. All right, does anybody have any questions? So if you have any questions, type them in chat before we go on to the next thing. Let's see. Okay, great question. So and the question Tim asked in chat is, will there be at least one mandatory checkpoint in each leg? So historically, my MO has been to make everything optional. That's like most courses that are done. I said they're all optional. Get what you want. However, this one, the plan is to make all the TAs mandatory and one of the paddling points. That is, and it'll be in your rules of travel, and it'll say all the TAs are mandatory and at least one paddling point. That's really just to kind of keep you going along the course, even if it's just getting the TA. Some TA is transition area, and so that would mean you transition. So, for example, like from bike to trek, or from trek to paddle, or back to trek, or what have you. So it'll make sense when you see the maps, and it'll make even more sense when I'll show you in a second our graphic. But basically, like the main sort of connection point between the different legs, those are mandatory. And then at least one paddling. So I want everyone to at least paddle to one of the points. Okay, a couple questions. This is great. Let's see, 1 second. How many maps per team? If you're on a team, I'll give you 2 sets of maps. If you want to share, or you have have one for a souvenir, I'll do 2 per team. Size of the kayak, I don't know what they are. They're big enough for you, Joe. Put it that way. They're standard like recreational kayaks from an outfitter out in the Shenandoah, and I think they generally fit all shapes and sizes. And so they're not like super sleek sea kayaks by any means, but they'll be fine. I'll talk more about transition area in just a minute. How big will the role of orienteering be on the course? So compass use. So the best orienteers I know, when they're orienteering, sometimes never use their compass. They all use based on land feature recognition. So it's a hard question to answer. I've designed the courses that you can work your way through, and if you can read the map, you will need a compass. I always carry a compass, and especially if you're not great at using the sort of the land features that are represented on the map, you might not need a compass at all. So it's a tough question to answer whether you're going to need one or not. But I will say if you were going to like clear all the points, you'd have to know how to read a map. If you want to get all of them, you have to know how to read a map pretty well. If you want to get just sort of the basic ones, you can probably get away with some less advanced knowledge for sure of what's on the map. Aaron, maps are all 8.5 by 11, all of them. They are going to be double-sided, 8.5 by 11. Okay, question is, will there be a bike drop before the mandatory start? That's great. No mandatory drop, so all your bikes will be, you don't have to like check in and then go somewhere else to drop anything. Everything will be either at the farm with you, or you'll take it somewhere else. Another question, is there a mandatory turnaround to head back to the finish line? Yes, there will be a mandatory time. There'll be some cutoffs where you have to leave one of the locations with enough time to make it back. Tim asked, are they sit-in tops or are they regular kayaks? They're sit-in kayaks, so they're not sit-on tops. They are regular sort of like cockpit style kayaks. If you are a team of 2 or 3, you get a canoe. If you're a soloist, you get a kayak. Ken asked a question about changing shoes in TA, bike shoes versus trekking shoes. You are going to have remote sections that you are going to bike to. So if you use clipless shoes on your bike and you want to transition to running shoes, then you have to carry your running shoes with you or have some way of transporting them to those other sections. Another good question. Will obvious maintained trails, will they be on the maps? Yes. Can we use your own paddles? Yes, you can. You can welcome to bring them with you. I will say I do not think it's a huge advantage to carry your own paddle gear in this event. I do not think it's a great advantage. And if I was doing this course and I was racing it, I would probably, I don't know. If I had a two-piece paddle that was like sticking out everywhere, I definitely wouldn't bring it. But I'll let you guys make that decision once you see the map and see how long that paddle is. All good questions. Any other questions before I move on? All right. One second. Get my stuff back here. All right, somebody give me a yes in chat if you guys can now see the PowerPoint or the Google Slides presentation. Awesome, cool. All right, so this is the overview. So I've gone back and forth about showing people this. Some people love it, some people hate it. For many years, I never gave any information about the course. Kristen, I'll answer your question in just a second. So here's the deal. This doesn't tell you a heck of a lot because you can go any direction from Button Farm and this would still sort of make sense. However, this is the flow of the 6-hour race. So you're going to start and finish at Button Farm. You are going to bike somewhere and you're going to have a transition area where you're going to transition to trek. You're going to trek for some amount of time. And at some point, you're going to arrive at another transition area where you're going to do a paddle. And then you're going to trek back to that original TA. And then heading back to the start, you're going to have a bike / a trek. 6 hours long. There will be water at this TA right here in the middle. So basically, you're going to see that TA after you bike there and before you bike back. As well as another time if you theoretically needed to. And that'll make sense kind of when you see the map and sort of what you're doing at those particular areas. But this is generally the flow of the event. Kristen, I'll answer your question. Are the canoe kayak paddle? So if you're in a canoe, meaning you're a team of 2 or 3, you will get single-bladed canoe paddles. If you are in a soloist, you'll get a double-bladed kayak paddle. All right, so here's the 10-hour course. So you're going to start and finish, and you're going to have a trek somewhere and come back to the start. Then you're going to bike somewhere to a TA, and you're going to have another trek. And then you're going to bike to a TA, and then drop your bikes and go to another TA and paddle somewhere, and then come back to that other previous TA, and then do a big bike and trek back to the start. So I'll go back. This is the 6-hour one. Again, you'll see in the roster, it's largely like 3 legs, basically. One of those legs has significant options and like significant decisions to make. And that is the crux of the event. In the 10-hour race, it's a little bit more complicated. There's more moving parts. You got more options, more decisions to make. 3 trekking sections. One at the very beginning, sort of one towards the front end, and then sort of a bigger monster one with lots of decisions, sort of around the paddle. So does anybody have any questions about that? And I'll tell you what I can. I'm not going to tell you much more than that. I don't want to give out too much. Oh, water. Good thing. Okay. I told you I'd tell you this. So if, let me just go with water on the 6 first. So there is going to be water at this transition area right here. So again, you bike to it, you drop your bikes, you go off and trek and paddle at some point. And then you're going to see it again before you come back. And trekking, Ken asks, is trekking running? Yes. Trekking is just a generic term for orienteering / running / whatever. Yeah, it's all synonymous. On the 10-hour course, there's going to be water. At the start and finish, we'll have water, right? And by the way, I'll tell you this again, but please come with your water bottles and your bladders filled. We bring a lot of water with us, but we don't have like running water really accessible. very accessible. So bring your CamelBacks or your water filled with you when you come in the morning. That'd be helpful. But obviously you're going to be trekking and coming back to the start. So you can decide what you want to carry for that first section. And then there'll also be water at this next TA here, which is you're going to bike to it and then go out for a trek and come back. So there'll be water there. And then at the following TA, which is where you're biking, dropping, and then going out and then coming back, there'll be water there. So technically, like water at the start, water at the first TA, and then water at this second TA, there'll be water. So water should not be an issue on the courses. All right, let me just see if there are any questions here. This is kind of getting the meat in this thing. All right, so the 10-hour TA1 is only visited once. Yeah, so this TA right in the middle here. So after you start, while you do a trek out and then back, and then you bike to a remote TA, that is correct. You only visit that TA once. So there's an actual order rather than a full free run. So great question. So this race does have an order, and it'll tell you that in your rules of travel. There are some races out there that are more sort of like true roguing, which means kind of like a go out and get whatever you want, whatever order. Some races even have like different point values for different checkpoints. But this one, it is going to be described in how you move across the course. But I will tell you, in really both races, there's one section that has a lot of decisions, like a lot of decisions. People are going to do a zillion different things. It'll be fun to talk to people after what they did. And in the 10-hour course, there's decisions really in many places, which is, again, adds a little bit of complexity to it. But again, in both races, the only mandatory points are your transition areas. So you got to move to the basic locations of the event, and then a single paddle point. So even if you're like brand new, the goal is just to like move across to the main sections of the race, and you'll still have an incredible journey. Okay. All right, let's see. Let's see. So can't drop off paddles before you start. That is correct. You have to carry your paddles with you if you wanted to use your personal paddle stuff. You cannot pre-stage your trekking shoes. You have to carry them if you want to have them. Question: will you have trackers? Well, we're not doing tracking this race, so you'll have your trackers we'll know where you went with our electronic punching, but there's not going to be trackers for this race. Josh, this is the 10-hour race, yeah? Confused about only hitting TA once? Okay, yeah. So basically, this is TA1 as well. We'll call this TA1, which I think is what you're asking about. So you do a trek from the start, you come back to the start, and then you bike somewhere. From that, at that TA, you drop your bike and go off on another trek. And then you leave there and bike to another place. On the way back, you don't go back to that first TA. You're biking all the way back to the start and finish at that point. So that clarifies things. Again, it'll all be crystal clear once you see your maps and kind of read the rules of travel, what you're doing. Let's see. Okay, questions. What questions do people have about the race? Again, Tim and Josh, when you guys see the map and you see the rules, the graphic is just to give an idea of what you're doing. It'll be when you see the maps and you'll know where you're going. It won't be confusing, trust me. Okay, Seven asked a question, or Doug, sorry. If we carry paddles, can we leave them with the bikes when we are trekking? Sure, yeah, you can leave stuff with bikes. Really, the only thing that's required is your mandatory gear. Paddle equipment isn't part of mandatory. So yeah, if you want to drop stuff, you're totally fine. Joe says, what's the penalty for each missed or finishing on time? Okay, great question. So in terms of penalty for missing checkpoints, you're official if you get all the mandatory checkpoints, which again is visiting the transition areas and getting whatever paddle point I tell you in the rules of travel is mandatory. You will be official, so there's no penalty. If you don't get those, you're an unofficial finisher. you should be able to go through the basic course if you manage your time appropriately. If you finish late, you lose a point after the first minute, lose a point again, basically a lot of points. So don't be late, basically. You will negate a lot of your effort if you come back too late. So don't be late. And it says that in your rules. You'll see that. That'll be like in the first section. Underline in bold. Don't be late. All right. Let's see. Okay. Quick break. Any other questions before I go into sort of just in general adventure racing in general? I'm going to go through some tips and tricks and other things. But if you're newer or more experienced with adventure racing and don't want to hang out for that, that's totally okay. And so I don't take it personally if you drop off. That'll be that. All right. Oh, one other question. For trekking, are the checkpoints hidden or in plain sight? Good question. So Ken, I'm not a big fan of hiding checkpoints, but I will say you got to be in the right spot. So I'm not going to like purposely hide it behind something. So if you've ever done like an orienteering event, typically controls are not hidden, right? Sometimes they're lower off the ground. You know, they might be in like a ditch or something. So you got to like know where you are, but I'm not going to sneaky and like hide them in a route or something. But I don't do that. Any other questions? All right. If you think of something, you can write it in chat. I'll monitor it. I'm going to go and share my screen again. Just pull up this. All right. So again, if you have questions as I go through, put them in chat. This is going to be more about adventure racing in general. So what is adventure racing? So adventure racing is a multi-sport where you are finding checkpoints in the woods via typically at least 3 disciplines. Typically trekking, which means synonymous with trekking, trail running, orienteering, right? You're going to be some sort of paddling and some sort of mountain biking. So every control looks like this. So they're standard kind of 12 by 12 orienteering flags. So this is what you're looking for in the woods. So again, I'm not going to hide them anywhere. If you're generally in the right spot, you will see this thing hanging from a tree or wherever I decide to put it. What makes adventure racing different than triathlon is a triathlon is, it's typically swim, bike, run. And the course is, you just follow course markings along the way. Not only that, if you do like, I don't know, Ironman so-and-so, generally the course stays the same year after year after year after year. So you can go back in year 2 or year 3 or year 10, and it's the exact same course, just like the Boston Marathon. You can run it 10 times, and it's generally always going to be the same. In an adventure race, you are navigating your way, finding these checkpoints via foot, bike, and paddle, and the courses change. And so one of the great things about adventure racing is that it's the dynamicness of the sport. And you could do VentureQuest, have done it, this will be 17 times. If you did every single year, every single course is different, which is one of the great things that makes it so awesome. So again, you're looking for these checkpoints. We use electronic timing, so everyone's going to have one of these little dipper things, or SI cards as they're called. And as you can see in that picture, there's a little rectangle box, and those boxes have little holes in them. And so you stick your dipper in there, it makes a little beeping sound. And that's how we identify that you've been to each checkpoint. Not all adventure races have electronic timing. Some adventure races have physical passports or pieces. Generally, they're people like pieces of either Tyvek or other type of waterproof paper. And they have little pinchers on them. And each one of those pinchers has a different pattern of metal pinprick. And when you put the pinprick in your Tyvek paper, it makes it a mark. There's a series of boxes with a checkpoint number. And that's how the race director keeps track of whether you visited each one of the points. So we use electronic timing. So this is like your passport, but just know if you go off and do another adventure race somewhere, they might not have electronic timing, and you might have a physical piece of paper that you're using to track that you've been to each checkpoint. One of the other things that makes adventure racing unique is that again, you're not following a more course. So you get really two important pieces of information when you check in. You're going to get a rules of travel, and you're going to get a map and or maps. So the rules of travel is like your instruction sheet on how you move through the course. It's going to tell you what you can and can't do. It's going to tell you whether certain sections have to be done, for example, in order or out of order, but it's going to clearly lay out the rules for the event. It'll also tell you a list of checkpoints or controls and a clue. And then you also have maps, and on that map, it's going to be the control locations in a little circle. Typically that circle is red or some other noticeable color with a checkpoint indicator next to it. So it might be number, it might be letter, but those two things go together. Now maps comes in all shapes and sizes. Just as an example, this is the VentureQuest map from back in 2018. This is an 11 by 17 paper. It's kind of hard to see, but very detailed orienteering, the whole thing. On the website, there's several other maps. You do longer races, maps can be 2 feet by 3 feet. This is a map that I did, this is years ago. But you can see that this is a map that's big, but they can be much, much bigger. Again, all our maps for this race are going to be 8.5 by 11, very manageable sizes. The scale, by the way, I didn't mention what the scale is. The scale is either 1 by 24,000 or 1 by 15,000. It's clearly indicated on the maps. If you know what magnetic declination is, the orienteering map that you're going to get is one like you see in the picture here, very detailed. That is adjusted for magnetic declination. The other maps are not. If you don't know what I mean by that, don't sweat it. Good question, Megan. Sorry, would there be physical punches we can use on the checkpoints at E-punch as it were? There are not. E-punches aren't going to. They're solid, so we don't have a backup for that. We will at TAs and stuff like that. We do some other backup tracking so we can see where people are moving through the course. It's all good. All right, so rules of travel. So in your rules of travel, this is one we had for a greenhorn race several years ago, but it has some introductory information. This, you'll see a segment here called like Group A, Group B, Group C. This was something special I did for this race, so you're not going to see that at VentureQuest. But what you are going to see is different legs or different segments of the event. So this race started with like a paddle and then went to a trek. And you notice it has specific instructions, like this one says paddle to CPs 2 through 5 in order. And it says these checkpoints or CPs must be required via boat in an order. So again, checkpoint is that orienteering flag. That's what you're going to find. And then you have these checkpoint numbers. So P1, P2, the ones in the trek, I saw labeled T1, T2, and so on. And they have clues. So those clues are to help you find what you're looking for and correlate what's on the map. So for example, P1, it's a small beach. P3, it's a paddle point, so it's somewhere on the shoreline. On the map, so there's a bunch of different maps. You guys are going to have several different maps, and they're going to look differently. You will have at least one map that looks like this. It's an orienteering map that has lots of detail on it. So this orienteering map tells you a lot of information, and I want to spend a minute talking about some of these things. If you've never been to an orienteering meet, there's an amazing opportunity this weekend to go to a Quantic orienteering meet on Sunday at Clopper Lake, which happens to be within Seneca Creek State Park. Get an orienteering map and get some practice running or walking around in the woods. You do have to pre-register for it. I think registration closes on Saturdays, but I think I put a link out in one of the emails that I sent you. But if you just Google QOC, Quantic Orienteering Club, it's the meet this weekend, and it would be a great way to get some practice. Not to mention, orienteering is one of the best ways to get better at adventure racing. But let me talk a little bit about what's on this map. Not all maps that you get are going to look like this, but obviously the colors tell you certain things. Blue is water. Hopefully that's fairly obvious, like because there's a big lake on this map and there's some little creeks running along. Yellow on this map or orange is like open area. Green, different shades of green, is heavier vegetation. So the darker the shade of green, the heavier the vegetation. White is more runnable woods, some more open woods. When I first started orienteering, it took me forever to get my head wrapped around when I looked at this map and it was like white. I thought that meant like there's like, it's just like open land. Well, it's not the case, right? So there's lots of woods where you don't see any color. On an orienteering map, areas that are truly open, meaning like void of trees, are that yellow orange or orange color. If they're really thick vegetation, that's where you have that light green to darker green. Again, the thicker the vegetation, the darker the green. Trails. So trails are indicated on this map with dotted black lines. Roads are solid black lines. On the maps you get at VentureQuest, some of the trails are indicated like this. Some of the maps are actually going to be indicated with like a solid red line, and it'll be fairly obvious which is which when you get your map. There's also some supplemental information I'm going to give you that help you translate what you see on the map versus what's on the map that I give you. I'm not going to have any in the 10-hour course. I might have a little bit of satellite imagery on one of your sections, but this is a different type of map. I did this map for one of the VentureQuest several years ago that we had out of Powick Bay. And the reason why I did a satellite image versus a topographic map is that the topographic map told you like nothing, largely because this section by P3, P5, and P2 was all tidal. And so on a topographic map, it looked like it was like you can go anywhere. But in reality, there was like these tide induced channels that existed. And if you didn't have a map like this, you couldn't tell where to go. And then here's a different type of map. So this is a map. Trails are indicated with these red dotted lines. There's less topographic lines that you see here. That's kind of going on. You have some darker green and you have some lighter color here. On this map, you would see after you went to a certain area that the open areas are more indicated with these white areas. So part of the fun about adventure racing and different styles of maps is you can look at a map, but it becomes more clear in your mind when you begin to translate what you're seeing on the map with what you see in real life, or translating a 2D world into a 3D world. You can do that by looking at the map, but part of the process of adventure racing, and every single race you go through this process, or a navigator does, is they go through and they start thinking about, okay, well, what am I seeing in real life? What am I seeing on the map? And you start making connections. Josh, you had a good question about a legend. So there's a legend here on this orienteering map. There is a legend on the orienteering map. So yes, on the orienteering map, you will have a legend that tells you what these different symbols mean. Yeah, Joe, they will be labeled. I'm going to cover that in just a second. And thanks for the link to the QOC event coming up. That's fantastic in chat. Okay, so here's another map. So this is a map back from 2008 of a Fountainhead. So you can see there's lots of different styles of maps. My MO for course design and map creation is I'm going to give you the information you need to navigate your way around, right? If you don't need super detailed information on the map, I might not give you information that has super detailed information on it. Or it might have other stuff that's sort of like not really important, but it gives you everything you need to get to where you're going to go. In an orienteering section, we do give you an orienteering map, which is going to have lots of information and very, very detailed information about trails and vegetation and what's actually there. All right, so here's what I want to show you. I'm going to bounce back and forth between a rules of travel and a map. So again, this is a race we had years ago, but I just want to show you. So the first segment was a paddle in this race. So you have P1, P2, P3, P4, P5, P6. And it says these checkpoints must be acquired by boat in order. This is what the map looked like. So you can see here's P1, here's P2, here's P3, here's P4, here's P5, here's P6. So, and all these things have clues. So as an example, P3 is shoreline. And so P3, this little circle is right on the shoreline of this lake. And so that's how you correlate the two. P6, excuse me, is a hilltop. So, and a large tree. So at P6, if you look at the map here, these contour lines indicate that you're going up away from the water, and this is a hilltop. And even more information you can glean from this map is it's a hilltop with an orange background. And so that would indicate to you that there's clearing or an open area, void of trees on that hilltop. So again, your rules of travel is going to tell you what you got to do, the order in which you have to do it, And then we'll give you clues to find each one of the checkpoints on that section. And then you go and relate that to the map. And the thing that makes adventure racing is that instead of following a set course, it's up to you to use your rules of travel and your map to figure out the most efficient way to get there. All right, so maps. Because you have to use these maps, it's a good idea to spend some time when you arrive at any race venue, including this one from VentureQuest, with plenty of time to look at the map. So for the 10-hour race, please don't show up at 7:30. You want to show up as early as possible to give yourself plenty of time to look at the map. It's a good idea to have some pens to maybe write some notes. Some people highlight routes using like markers on like, hey, I'm going to go this way and then this way and then this way. It's up to you, but it's a good idea. The most important thing is to give yourself plenty of time to absorb the information. Joe asked the question, well, you have to carry the kayak to water. A very short distance, maybe. And you can drag it because it's grass largely the whole way. But I'm not going to make you carry it like a long way. Let's see. One other tip. When you first get your map and your rules of travel, it can be overwhelming. My best piece of advice to you is to just slow down. And before you become overwhelmed by what you see, read the whole rules of travel from start to finish. So ignore the map. Just look at your rules of travel and absorb what it's going to say, right? It's going to say, for example, after the prologue, start on bikes to points X, Y, and Z. And then it's going to say, leg 2, drop your bikes and transition to track, and track here to here with rules. So get the overall flow of the event in your head first, and then start translating individual sections to checkpoint locations, and then start thinking about your routes. It can be very overwhelming, especially to people who are new to the sport, because you get all this information. You might not have a lot of experience looking at a map, and it just like will blow your mind, and you'll become overwhelmed. Take a deep breath, take a step back, and read the whole rules of travel first. That's the best piece of advice I can give you, and something that we still kind of do anytime I do a race with my team. And then go translate it to the map. Paddling. So again, if you're a soloist, you're going to be in a canoe, and this is actually Josh is paddling a canoe in the top, which is a kayak, which is basically the same type of kayaks that we're going to have. That's a double-bladed outfitter provided canoe paddle or kayak paddle. So that's the type of thing that you get if you're a soloist. On the bottom there, that's a 2-person team. You don't have to take your clothes off to do VentureQuest, but again, it's a hot day. Just kidding. Those are the type of boats that you're going to be in. And then you can see those are single-bladed canoe paddles that those 2 guys have. If you're a team of 3, you are going to be in a canoe, 3 people in a boat. I do not know 100% sure if there's center seats in all the boats. But if it's not, some of them might be a little bit different. The middle person, you just can kind of kneel or sit on a backpack or something. And the front person and the back person will have seats. Mountain bikes. So lots of different shapes and sizes for mountain bikes. Most of the riding in the 6-hour course is largely on single track. Largely on single track. Some solid, really fun trails, depending on which route you take. In the 10-hour course, there's a little bit of mixed terrain in there, but the areas in the park and around the park have really great trail riding, and hopefully if the weather cooperates, we'll be able to ride on all those trails, and it'll be super fun. So one thing I want to point out, we get questions a lot about map boards on bikes. And so when I first started adventure racing, I didn't have a map board. I do now, and they're super helpful. But if you're newer to the sport, they're kind of hard to find sometimes. My friends at Rootstock Racing, they're a carrier of a company called Autopilot, I think, and they have some map boards, but probably too late to get one. But if you're into the sport, you know, and you want to navigate while you're on your bike, getting some sort of map board is a good idea. I recommend buying one versus like trying to make one yourself. I can't tell you how many things I've seen over the years people rig together and they break. Not all the time, but sometimes. So there's some commercially ones that are made typically in Europe that you can get. If you're interested in something, I can hook you up with somebody who'll be able to get you one if you want to try. If you don't have one, just have your mapping handy, right? If you have a map case, you can put it on your neck, you can put it in your backpack, and if you have to stop your bike and look at where you are, so be it, right? But just know you might see people with these things on their bike, and they're just called map boards. And that's the idea, is that you can see the map while you're riding your bike. All right, let's see. A couple things I want to talk about here is teamwork and team goals. So if you are on a team, one of the most important things you should talk about before the race happens is what your goals are for the race. There is nothing more frustrating and could be more damaging to teammates and friendships is if you go into a race and your goals are not aligned, meaning like one person thinks, hey, I want to win, and the other person thinks like, hey, I just want to survive. One person says, I'm going to run everything. Another person says, what's running? I walk. So talking about those things before race day is really important and will make your race experience way more comfy and just you'll be more successful. A couple other tips. Figure out who's navigating before the race, even if we don't know, and you're going to kind of work on it as a team. At least you've talked about it, right? Typically, races teams have one. Sometimes they have multiple navigators, but typically one person is sort of like primary guiding the team at any given time. That's a common practice. But just make sure you know who's got the maps, like who's leading us, and talk about it. And again, even if you're not sure, if you're beginners and you want to do it by committee, that's okay. But just talk about that and make sure everybody's on the same page. One piece of advice for navigating, particularly in the beginning of a race: slow down. It can be very tempting to just run off or cycle off in a direction. And before you know it, you've lost touch with where you are on the map, meaning like you're someplace on the course, on some trail somewhere, and you're like, well, where are we? And you look at your map and you're like, oh, I don't know where we are. The most important thing in adventure racing and the most important thing in orienteering is generally knowing where you are at any given time on the map. Because even if you're in the wrong place, if you know where you are on the map, you can correct, right? It gets more problematic if you don't know where you are on the map. Let's see. There's something else I want to say about team. So just communicate before the race. That's the best piece of advice. And then closely second, slow down, particularly in the beginning of the race, and take your time. There'll be plenty of opportunities to go faster as you get your head wrapped around what you're doing. All right, let's see. Resources. So a couple of things. The U.S. Adventure Racing Association website was redone a couple of years ago. They've really done a great job. There's a section for new racers, and it's like a narrative, kind of takes you through step by step. It's a great resource, and the folks at USARA they're great people and good friends, and they do a good job. And so if you're new to the sport and want to kind of like understand about what you're getting into, go to USARA.com, the website, and go to that racers, and then like a new to racing or something, and give that a read. It's really well done. If your mind wants to be blown about some really cool adventure races out there that are like typically longer, there's a really wonderful series called the Adventure Racing World Series, or ARWS, and there are races around the world. And there's some really great things, some great videos. So you should check out Adventure Racing World Series, ARWS. That'd be another thing to kind of let your mind wander. QOC. We are lucky enough that we have the best orienteering club in the entire nation, arguably the world, in the Mid-Atlantic, based here in the DMV. So if you Google QOC or look up Quantico Orienteering Club, they have events, formal events in the fall, winter, spring. You have some informal stuff in the summer as well, but generally orienteering is like an off season in the summer. The best way to get practice at adventure racing is to orienteer, period, hands down. There are awesome great clubs as well. So DVOA, there's some stuff down by to Richmond as well. Good clubs. I don't mean to say one. I just happen to be a proud QOC member, so I'm biased, obviously. But there are great orienteering clubs all up and down the East Coast, really. We just happen to be lucky, again, just like adventure racing. The fact that DVO exists, and there's I can't remember the one in other parts of Virginia. But anyway, there's great opportunities. So orienteering, again, I can't stress enough. There you go, CVOIC. Is the best way to get better at adventure racing is to orienteer, period, hands down. And then my other advice to you is practice. So if this is like going to be your first adventure race, it's going to be like maybe super challenging. But the whole point is that you practice and get better. So that's it. I thought this was a great quote. So this is Mark Burnett, who in some regards can be credited with like sort of creating adventure racing in the US in some shape, form or another. But he said this thing like the attributes of team's failure is really like two different things. This is he's talking about a large expedition race, but it really holds true for shorter stuff too, is inadequate map reading experience and the lack of comfort being outside. People often ask me like, how do I get better and how do I train for adventure racing? And there's really two ways in my mind. You do stuff outside. The longer race you want to do, the more stuff you do outside. But you get practice being on your feet, riding your bike, doing whatever. And you practice reading a map, whether that's doing adventure races or doing orienteering meets or both. But getting comfortable outside and being able to understand and read a map is the best way to get better at adventure racing. All right, so I think that's all I got. What questions do people have? Happy to answer anything else in general. If not, I'm going to let you. Oops. Oh boy. Going to let you go. Sorry, something popped up weird on my computer. Does anybody else have any questions? All right, with that, I'm going to let you go. Again, on Sunday, I will send out the pre-race email for VentureQuest itself. It's going to have a whole lot of information in it. If you have any questions when you get that, or you just want to ask me something, send me an email, send me a text, give me a phone call, whatever. I'm happy to talk about adventure racing, and I'm really looking forward to seeing everybody on the 30th. We're gonna have an awesome time. And Josh, have no fear, my friend. It's going to be outstanding. Take your time and just enjoy the experience. And I can't wait to see everybody. It's going to be really, really awesome. All right. Thanks for coming, everybody.